It was just after 1 a.m. when my fuel light blinked on. I'd been driving along. Empty stretch of Vancouver Island Highway, nothing but forest and fog. When an old gas station finally appeared, half lit and quiet, I pulled in fast. No cars. No houses around. Just a single pump and a building that looked barely alive. As I stepped out, the air felt off, like the whole place was holding its breath. While pumping gas, I heard a sharp metal clank from behind the station. Not an animal sound, something heavier. I froze, listening. Nothing. I told myself to relax, but then I noticed the front door of the store. It was slightly open, just enough to be wrong. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The lights were on, but the store felt abandoned. No cashier. No music. No humming refrigerators. Just silence thick enough to feel. I headed toward the washroom, but when I opened the door, I almost stopped breathing. On the sink were bloody handprints. Small ones, like someone had tried to pull themselves up. They were fresh enough to still look wet. I stumbled back. The storage room door next to me creaked. A voice whispered from inside, trembling, "Please don't leave." I froze, staring at the barely open door. A man's face appeared through the gap, pale, shaking, a cut across his cheek. He looked terrified, not dangerous. "He's still here," he whispered. "Please, don't let him see me." My stomach dropped. Before I could ask anything, a heavy footstep echoed from the front of the store. One step, then another. Slow, purposeful. The man in the storage room whipped the door shut, whispering, "Hide." I didn't. I ran. I bolted out the side exit, sprinted across the dark lot, and dove into my car. I locked the doors just as a man stepped. Out from behind the ice freezer, near the storefront. He was tall, in work boots, wearing a jacket smeared with something dark. His face was calm, too calm. He didn't yell or rush. He just started walking toward my car, steady and confident, like he had all the time in the world. I tore out of the lot, gravel spraying, hands shaking so hard I almost veered off the road. A few kilometers later, I finally got cell signal and called 911. When officers arrived at the station, they found the injured man still hiding in the storage room. They didn't find the other man, and the cashier who was supposed to be working that night was never located. I don't usually get paranoid when I'm high, but that night hit different. My roommates were gone for the weekend, the house was silent, and a heavy Canadian winter storm had already knocked the power out twice. I smoked just enough to relax and sank into the couch with the TV low. Then I heard it, a tiny click from the back door. Not wind, not the storm. A click, like someone testing the lock. I muted the TV and listened. Another sound followed, a slow, careful push, as if someone was easing the door open inch by inch. My high sharpened everything. Every noise felt magnified. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Inside, I grabbed my phone and texted my roommate, "Are you home?" No response. Footsteps began, soft, controlled, someone trying not to make noise. I stepped into the kitchen and grabbed the only thing that felt like a weapon, a metal pan. My hand shook so hard it clanged against the counter. At the end of the hall, I saw movement. A figure pressed flat against the wall, barely visible in the dark, like they were blending into it. I whispered, "Who's there?" No reply. I stepped closer. The figure instantly slipped out of sight, fast and silent, like they'd been waiting for me to move. My stomach dropped. Someone was inside, and they were trying to stay quiet. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door. The knob twitched almost immediately, like a hand had been reaching for it. I backed against the wall, gripping the pan like an idiot but too scared to put it down. Footsteps moved slowly up and down the hall, pausing outside each door. Then a soft scrape across the floor. Then breathing, right outside my room. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, whispering that someone had broken in. The operator told me officers were on the way. I didn't breathe until I heard sirens. The footsteps drifted toward the living room. Then silence. Blue and red lights flashed through my blinds. The police swept the house, telling me not to unlock my door until they cleared everything. The back door lock had been pried open. Mud on the floor. No sign of who was there. An officer said quietly, "He slipped out when we arrived. He was watching for us." The next morning, the news reported a string of break-ins across the area. The intruder entered while people were awake, moved silently, and always escaped before anyone saw his face. And he still hadn't been caught. I grew up hunting in Alberta. Cold mornings, quiet forests, the kind of stillness that makes every sound feel too loud. I'd never been scared out there before, not once, until the weekend I went with my cousin Mark to a spot his co-workers swore was full of elk. We hiked in before sunrise. The air had that dry cold that stings your teeth. Around mid-morning, we heard movement downhill. Heavy steps. Slow. Not an elk. Not a bear. Just pacing. Mark whispered, "That's huge." We crouched behind deadfall, waiting. Branches cracked again. And again. As if whatever it was kept circling us. I lifted my binoculars. That's when everything went wrong. Between the trees stood a person, or something trying to look like one, wearing a full animal pelt. Fur, hide, antlers, the whole thing. Except it didn't hang naturally. It clung to them, tight, like it was shaped to their body. Mark muttered, "What the hell?" The figure didn't move like a hunter. No rifle. No gear. Just empty hands and a head tilted at an angle that felt wrong. Then it stepped behind a pine. Then another pine. Closer. Then another. Advancing silently. We stood up to show we weren't easy targets. Mark shouted, "Yo, you okay out there?" His voice disappeared into the trees. The figure froze, then lowered onto all fours. Smooth. Controlled. A chill slid down my spine. We are leaving. Now. We backed along the trail. The footsteps followed, the same deliberate pacing, never rushing, never stopping. Just tracking us like it already knew our rhythm. Halfway back, Mark glanced behind us and froze. The figure was crouched maybe 40 feet away, antlers rising above a stump. Under the pelt, the face was human, streaked with dark paint, eyes wide and unblinking. Not an animal. A person. A person pretending to be something else. We ran. Branches snapped. Our boots skidded on frost. The footsteps behind us finally broke into a sprint. Heavy, fast, determined. I didn't look back. We didn't stop until the service cabin appeared. We dove inside, slammed the door, shoved a table against it. The footsteps approached. Then silence. Not retreating. Just waiting. Minutes passed before the steps faded into the forest, steady and unhurried, like whoever wore that pelt knew we weren't going anywhere. RCMP searched until dark. Nothing. No tracks except ours. No animals. No signs of a camp or anyone living out there. We tried telling ourselves it was over. But the next morning, the news broke. A group of hunters had been found in the same forest, hours after we left. All of them brutally killed. Torn open. Parts missing. They called it an animal attack. But I know what stalked us. And whatever it wasn't an animal. We were just driving around, killing time on a cold Canadian night. It was me, Riley, and Lucas. Around 3 a.m., Riley said she needed a bathroom, and the only place open was this tiny gas station surrounded by forest. The second we stepped inside, something felt off. The air smelled like bleach. The store was way too quiet, and there was no cashier anywhere. "Hello." Lucas called. No answer. Then we heard it from the back office, a slow, heavy dragging sound across the floor. Not fast, not panicked, just steady. Riley grabbed my arm. "We are leaving." We turned around, and a white van was suddenly parked beside the building. No windows. Engine running. It wasn't there when we went in. A man stepped out from behind it. He looked like a normal worker, but his boots were wet with something dark, and he kept rubbing his hands like he couldn't stop shaking. "You three need help?" he asked. His tone didn't match the question. It sounded like he already knew the answer. "We are good," I said, reaching our car. He followed us. Close. I didn't see you pull in, he added. We didn't respond. We just got inside and locked the doors. He tried the passenger handle first, then the back door, then my side, testing each one like he was checking a checklist. Then he looked toward the tree line and nodded. 2 other men stepped out of the dark. That's when Lucas screamed, "Drive!" I hit the gas so hard we fishtailed out of the lot. The men didn't chase on foot. They didn't have to. The van peeled out behind us, headlights blasting the mirrors. Riley was crying. Lucas kept twisting around yelling, "They're still there. They're right there." I turned down an unmarked dirt road, killed the headlights, and kept driving blind until I found a logging turnout. We slid into it, shut everything off, and ducked. The van roared past a few seconds later, engine screaming. We waited until the sun came up before we drove home. Later that day, we looked up the gas station. Police were already there. The cashier hadn't shown up for their shift. The back office floor had drag marks soaked into it, and the security cameras had been torn out the night before. The sound we heard, it wasn't pipes. It wasn't animals. Someone had already been dragged through that room. And after seeing those men in the trees, I'm pretty sure we were meant to be next. Didn't even want to go out that night. It was one of those cold Canadian evenings where the air feels damp enough to bite, but not cold enough for snow. My friends dragged me to a house party way out on a semi-rural street, the kind where houses sit far apart and the streetlights barely reach the end of the driveway. By 1:40 a.m., most people were either passed out or waiting for rides. The house had that strange late-night quiet, the kind where every small sound feels amplified. I stepped onto the deck to cool off. The yard looked normal at first, dark, quiet, nothing odd. Then the motion light flicked on. A figure stood at the back fence. White mask. No movement. Just facing me. I froze, thinking it was a joke. But then another mask stepped out from behind the cedar trees. A third appeared beside the shed. A fourth leaned against the fence gate. And the fifth, taller, broader, stood almost directly under the deck stairs, like it had been there much longer than the others. 5 masks. Not moving. Not shifting. Not breathing visibly in the cold. I slipped back inside and locked the door without saying anything. But my hands were shaking so badly someone noticed. "What's wrong?" they asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but the house answered for me. The power went out. Not the block. Just our house. Phones dimmed. Music stopped. The room fell into this heavy, suffocating silence. Then, tap, 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 on the glass behind me. A girl pulled the curtain an inch and instantly backed away. They're right at the door. Footsteps scraped along the side of the house. Slow, deliberate. Something dragged across the siding, window to window. Then the front door handle twitched, someone pressing steadily against it, like testing how much force the lock could take, never rushing. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Another step. Then another. Everyone who belonged in the house was standing right beside me. I lifted my phone flashlight toward the stairwell. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a mask leaned around the corner at the top of the stairs. Not fully, just enough to be seen. Blank face. Head slightly tilted. Completely still. Outside, the other masks started knocking in a perfect rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. The one upstairs tapped back, matching it exactly. They were signaling. Coordinated. Connected. Someone tried dialing 911. No service. Not one bar. It didn't feel like coincidence. We didn't make a plan. We just moved. Someone yanked open the kitchen window, and we scrambled onto the porch roof, dropping into the neighbor's yard one by one. The cold hit instantly, but adrenaline pushed us until the house disappeared behind the trees. Police searched the place later. No footprints on the frosty lawn. No forced entry. No broken locks. But on the kitchen counter sat a single mask. Inside it, written tiny, "You opened the door for US.